I don't know about you, but honestly, I have always thought it would have been phenomenal if you could tell the future, especially this last couple of years, right? To be able to be like, well, we shouldn't do this, or we should do that, or we got to be careful with this, because you could see, or at least have a glimpse of the future. But the truth of the matter is that none of us know what the future holds. But the beautiful thing is that the God that we serve does. We have a God who guides us into the future, and even though we don't know what it holds, we can be confident with the Lord's ability to know who we are, where we're headed, what his plans are for us, and that he has everything we need in every season of our life. In fact, in these next 2 weeks together, we're going to be looking at, personally, a really favorite passage of mine, and that's Psalm 23. And, I asked the Lord to give me sort of a passage to come into February with, and sort of to set some more of the tone for our year together. And I thought it was interesting that he gave me Psalm 23. It's not a very long passage at all. It's just a few short verses. And it's a song of remembrance of God's goodness written by David, none other than King David himself. And, when I asked God earlier at the end of last year to give me sort of the vision for where we were headed and what we were doing, and he gave me this verse, at first I was a little uncomfortable with it because it's not really a map to do something or where to go. It's really more of how God guides us and provides for us. And so I've been praying and thinking and talking to God about what his plans and purposes are for us as a church and me as an individual. And really, to be honest with you, it was just a beautiful thing. And then it just kind of clicked that, maybe it's trite, maybe it's cute, maybe it's too cool for school, but like that God gave me Psalm 23 to be the verse for 2023. And I really just want to share this next 2 weeks with you some ideas that the Lord's been speaking to me out of Psalm 23. And the first of which is simply that, like where God guides us, he provides for us. God knows who we are, where we are, and what we need. And so even though you don't have the ability, and I don't have the ability to see into the future or to make always the best decisions about what to do next, or should I get this job, or should I do this, or should I do that, or what's my next move, or is now a good time to have kids, or should I, invest in that, or should I save money, or should I buy or sell or refi, or you name it. Even though we don't always know what to do, that the Lord guides and the Lord provides. And especially the Lord provides when you follow him where he's guiding you. And so I wanted you to just take a look at the first half of Psalm 23. I'm going to read it to you right now from the New Living Translation. And we're just going to read the first 3 verses together. It says, this is from the NIV. It says, "The Lord is my shepherd, and I lack nothing. He makes me to lie down in green pastures, and he leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake." I mean, just those 3 verses alone, the psalmist David, now at this point is king when he writes this, and he writes it because he's reflecting upon the reality of how God has guided and provided. Now, I love David's story because David is messy. David doesn't always get it right. In fact, David is very messy at times in his life. But the Bible talks about him as a man after God's own heart, a man that constantly is pursuing God's path for his life. And as he pursues or chases after God, God provides. And so for us as a church and as a people, we really need to be in pursuit of the Holy Spirit this year. If we follow after God, if we stay the course and walk where he's leading us, then he'll provide us. And so I wrote down some ideas of the kind of things that God provides as quoted from Psalm 23. What does the King David have to say about God's provision as we follow him? As he guides us, as the good shepherd leads us, what is it that he provides for us? So I'd love for you to take notes right now if you're writing these down. The first thing that God provides for us, according to Psalm 23, is he provides for us a relationship. It says that God, is the Lord. The Lord is my shepherd. And I underlined "is my" in my Bible. It's a very personal, relational statement to say the Lord is my shepherd. And so when you quote Psalm 23 as a personal verse, and what David's doing in this moment is very big and powerful if you really pay attention to it. In our modern day translations, when you see the word Lord and all four of the letters Lord are capitalized, it's because, and there's really two Hebrew words for Lord. There's Adonai, and then there's Yahweh, right? And so Adonai means like the sovereign God, right? Or the sovereign king or the sovereign leader. But Yahweh means God the creator himself, right? And so you wouldn't use that word for anything other than you're talking about the creator of heaven and earth. And it's the most, most dramatic way that you can say God in the ancient text. Now, the reason this is so important is I want you to think about this. Like when the scribes were translating the Bible, think back, like you've heard of like the Dead Sea Scrolls, or maybe I was fortunate enough to go on a field trip to the museum and see those when they were in San Diego. When the scribes at Qumran were handwriting the scrolls, right, and perhaps even the Dead Sea Scrolls themselves, right, when they were writing them, it's said, history teaches us, that they would write this word Lord or Yahweh, and they were so reverent of God's name that they would drop out the vowels so that, because again, not to get too Hebrew on us, but like in the Hebrew language, if you write a vowel wrong, it changes the complete meaning of the word. So they had so much respect for Yahweh that they were careful even how they wrote it. And so they'd be writing with a quill, right? Like a feather dipped in ink, and they'd be writing, and then they'd get to this word Yahweh, Lord, in all caps, right? And they would throw that quill away, get another quill, and then they would write the name Yahweh, and then they would break that quill, get another quill, and then keep writing again. And then some, like biblical historians even say that some of the writers, the scribes at Qumran, would actually even go, every time they would get to the word Yahweh, or in English, Lord in all caps, that they would go take a ritual bath. They would go get rebaptized unto repentance before they would even write the name of God down. Now, the reason I share all this with you is because I want you to see in this simple sentence that the Lord is my shepherd, that Yahweh, creator of heaven and earth, big God, is my shepherd. Now, in our modern day culture, that word shepherd, it's the derivative of the word that we get pastor for. It's supposed to be more than just a title, though. It's not somebody that goes to Bible college and gets a credential. It is that God is with me the way a shepherd guards his sheep. And so you have to have a little bit of understanding of a shepherd guarding their sheep. I love agrarian verses like this because I grew up in Bakersfield in most of my childhood, and into even junior high a little bit. I was in Bakersfield, and that's one of the things that there's a lot of in Bakersfield is sheep. And if you know anything about sheep, not only does the Bible use the metaphor of sheep and shepherd to describe his relationship with us, and we are the shepherd, and we are the sheep, and he is the good shepherd. But in this context, David is referring to the good shepherd not just as a shepherd, but the shepherd, God in the flesh, Yahweh, God incarnate. It's a precursor to us talking about Jesus, the good shepherd. Jesus refers to himself as the good shepherd. He says, "I am the good shepherd." And so when you think about this verse, it's this big giant God is caring for us, his sheep. Now, if you don't know anything about sheep are not necessarily the brightest of animals, right? Sheep don't have the ability to take care of themselves. Sheep don't have the ability to, even necessarily foresee their needs. Like sheep will get into oncoming traffic. If there's a hole in the fence, the sheep will crawl out of the hole of the fence. And then when a sheep sees another sheep doing something, they just follow each other. They kind of tend to do that. Like they're just like, oh, well, what's going on over there? And they just kind of mindlessly go about their business. And, so you have this ability for a sheep to get itself into trouble, for it to get hurt, for it to get damaged, for it to get taken advantage of. They're animals that don't really have that much of a defense mechanism in and of themselves. They're pretty easy targets, left to their own devices, so all these sorts of things. So when God refers to us as sheep, It's because of a couple of things. One, sheep are followers. They follow the shepherd. But also, it's because it's explaining this divine connection between us and relationship with God. Coming into this year, I really want you to be thinking about that. I want you to be thinking about your divine connection with the creator of heaven and earth. You know, I've heard it said that, like God calls us sheep because sheep are stupid. And while that's somewhat true, I can be pretty knuckleheaded most of the time. And yet God still guides and provides for me. And I get myself into situations and problems and circumstances that when you leave me to my own devices, like a sheep crawling through a hole in the fence, I get caught into oncoming traffic, or I'm open to the prey of, temptation and frustration. It's more than that. This relationship that David is describing is just very intimate, very personal, very much God cares about you. You're his sole purpose. Because a shepherd without a sheep is just a dude in a field. It's this symbiotic, connective, I love you and provide for you because it's my purpose to love you. It's my identity. God is love. Now, the reason that's so important is that I want you to look at your life in this next season and think about that the creator of heaven and earth wants to and longs to be in a personal relationship with you, and that he knows you better than you know yourself. The shepherd knows when the sheep need to eat and where the good pasture is and what should come next. Like shepherds are paying attention to this kind of stuff. They have to be thoughtful. Which brings me to the second part of Psalm 23, verse 1. I read you the first half of verse 1. The Lord is my shepherd. And then it says, I shall not want, or I lack nothing. That God doesn't just guide me, doesn't just lead me, but he provides for me. The role of a shepherd is, like a good shepherd, which that's what Jesus refers to himself as. A good shepherd has to have the ability to, look into the near future and make good decisions about where is the best pasture, where is the safest place, where do the sheep need to go, and how is he going to get them there in a way that he doesn't lose any, and if he does lose any, how does he get the rest of them into a safe enough spot that he can go back and get the one that's lost. This idea that the sheep can't take care of themselves, but that God, or the shepherd, Yahweh, the Lord, always has a plan. He knows the where, the when, and the how of what you need right now in your life. Now, a lot of times for us as sheep, we can perhaps let our curiosity or our wandering nature to get us into trouble, when in reality, what we want isn't always good for us, but God knows exactly what we need. And so when we say that he guides and he provides, we're saying that this relationship that he has with us gives him the ability to foresee what we need and where we need to go. And so when we follow the path that he's marked out for us, not just the general path of love God, love people, yes, but specifically, I believe that God has a plan and a purpose for you. Listen to me right now. If this is the first time anyone's ever spoke to you like this, you need to sit up and pay attention. Yes, you might be a sheep, but God has a plan for his sheep. To provide, to guide, to comfort, to love, to come alongside of. And so when you see this, that God has a plan, he plans out, even the minutia of the details of what needs to happen in our lives. And sometimes that looks like God taking us through a desert experience so he can get us to a good pasture, a green pasture, a beautiful pasture on the other side. And so right now you might be in a season of your life that is dry and scary and dark and terrible, and we'll talk a little bit more about that next week, but in reality, he's probably leading you to a safe pasture, a beautiful place. In fact, if you keep reading in Psalm 23:2, it says that the Lord is my shepherd, verse 1, I shall not want. So he's a personal, relational God that provides my needs. And then in verse 2, he says, he makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. I was thinking a lot about this, and I wrote down some ideas from memory and childhood and the little that I do know about sheep. And it seems to me that there are 4 basic needs that sheep need if they're going to rest. From these 4 needs, they need to be free. They need to be free from fear. Like if a sheep is afraid, you're not going to get that sheep to bed down to rest. If the sheep is experiencing too much conflict or friction within the other sheep, I don't know if you know this or not, but like sometimes sheep will actually bite each other and fight that way and butt heads and bite. It's not just billy goats that do that. Sheep will do it as well. And so there's that friction. And then, if a sheep is too hungry, that sheep is looking for something to eat. And, really, sheep will eat, like goats, a lot of things. They'll eat down to the very nub. They can get their mouths down to the very base of the ground and almost eat below the surface of the ground and eat everything in their way. And so if a sheep's hungry, it's not going to rest. And then if a sheep is being, they have to be free from pests. So like if there's too many bugs or, like infection or flies buzzing around, the sheep's going to be agitated. He's not going to lay down. So it's going to keep getting up to feel more comfortable. You can't expect a sheep to lay down on an ant hill and take a nap. It's going to get bit. It's going to get upset. And so when you think about these four things that a sheep has to be free from, has to be free from fear, has to be free from the friction or the conflict of the others around them, has to be free from hunger, has to be free from pests. So when, it says that the Lord guides and then he provides resources, some of the resources that he provides, first and foremost, is this provision of rest. And so when it says he makes me lie down, or if you're old school and you grew up in the King James, he maketh me to lie down in green pastures, it's that he makes me free. Free from the fear of if I rest, then I'm not going to be able to accomplish the things I wanted to accomplish. Some of us are running around like so crazy, trying to get it all in and get it all done and make up for lost time, that what you really need to do is just rest. In a couple of weeks, we'll actually talk about the spiritual, godly idea of sometimes you just need to eat and take a nap as we look at the story of Elijah in the coming weeks. There's something about preparing yourself for the future that means that you have to rest. And, we're just not very good at resting. That's why I love that David even says it, that he makes me to lie down, that he leads me beside the still waters. And he doesn't just make me lie down because it's time to take a nap. He makes me lie down in green pasture. He leads me beside the still water so that I could take a drink without fear of falling in and getting washed away. The green pasture so that I can lay down and without any effort just eat, right? And so these things that we say that you have to be free from, then the idea, even if you look at that when he says he makes me, it's that he's providing this freedom for me to rest, this freedom for me to have this season of rest, this moments of rest, and these restful times. Now, this idea of rest is often lost on us because in American culture, we're busy, 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 go, 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 and we often wear busyness as a badge of honor. And I'll be honest, it's very counterintuitive, even though I'm very guilty of it. It's very counterintuitive to God's plans and purposes for our lives. In fact, rest, or Sabbath rest especially, is built into the very fabric of creation. On the seventh day, he what? Well, he rested. And then it becomes law in Levitical law, and then you see it carried out with Jesus and his disciples and the early church and even today. And while the Sabbath may be, depending on how you worship and what brand of Christianity you are, might be a Saturday, might be a Sunday, it doesn't really matter the day. In fact, Jesus even says the Sabbath wasn't made for, man wasn't made for the Sabbath was made for man. The idea of building intentional seasons of rest, it's why there's day and night. It's why there's the weekend, the way that God built our even calendar, so that you would have the ability to actually take a break, connect with God and others, so that you could have the green pasture and the still water to restore your soul. This is really what we're talking about. We're talking about the idea of us being in a relationship with God and him being this resource that provides for us. It's about him providing us rest when we need it, even though we're not very good at taking advantage of it. And then we're talking about the idea of that rest being a season of restoration. Like rest is just the beginning of restoration. When you think about that word restoration, you can't, deny that verse 3 of Psalm 23, he says that he restores my soul. When I think about restoration, I don't think just simply about God taking something that's jacked up and making it good again. I think of it more about being made new, being made complete, being made whole, taking something that's been done wrong and making it right. In fact, if you look at the verse again, it says, he restores my soul and he leads me in paths of righteousness. right? Righteousness means right living. But right living isn't about my actions, it's about my standing, right? My standing with Yahweh, the creator of heaven and earth, with God himself as a personal relationship, the good shepherd, that it provides me the resources I need to accomplish the goals and dreams that God has for me, the rest that I need. But then when it says that he makes me right, that he leads me in righteous paths, it means that when I follow the right path, his path, when he guides, that he provides. And so this restoration is him taking me from the wrong path and putting me back in right standing or with him. It's not about me making it right or some penance that I have to pay when it says he leads me in paths of righteousness. It's not just about it's like, well, he leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. It means that by the virtue of me being connected to his name. Do you understand this, Christians? Like when you call yourself a Christian, a Christ follower, it is for his name's sake that you are claiming. And so when you look at this passage and you say that he leads me in the right path because I'm attached to his name, it goes full circle in these first 3 verses that the Lord is my relational shepherd, deeply and meaningfully connected to me. The creator of heaven and earth loves me, cares for you, sees you as valuable, worth it, and important. So much so that even though you don't know what you need or what to do next, that he does, because he knows where you are and where you're headed and what you need. But even more so that he provides you the rest that you refuse to take. It says that he makes us, that he leads us, and that he restores us. And it's those right paths for his name's sake. I just think it's a beautiful idea that you see it go in this circular motion. And if you're not paying attention to it, it could just be a memory verse from childhood. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He leads me, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. You know, like, and you could just repeat it out of rote and it not mean as much as it actually means. This is a statement, a very short passage that David writes as a reflection on his relationship with God, God being the source of his provision, that God being not only the provision, but the rest giver, and that God is the one who is putting him back in right standing. It's not what I do to get back in right standing. It's not finding my way back from the detour. It's that he came. The whole point of Jesus was to put the world back into right standing. Like we couldn't do it by ourselves. And so he puts us all back into right standing. We make it so complicated that we turn the gospel, the story of God's love, into bad news. It's supposed to be gospel, good news, but we make it bad news by making it so complicated. I mean, if you rewind just a little bit, you see Psalm 19, verse 7. It's from the Message Bible. It says this: the revelation of God, right, is whole and pulls our lives together. So the story of God, or God revealing himself to man, is the complete story that unites us and pulls our lives, gives our lives purpose and meaning and identity, right? So it pulls our lives together. The signposts of God, or the path in which, the righteous paths, as for his name's sake, as David says, the signposts of God are out on the right road. And so, like, you can see them when you're walking in the space and the place that God has mapped out for you. You know that it is because you start to see it all come together. Now, I know that's hard to believe sometimes because of the dry places that we find ourselves as we're making our way to green pastures. Next week, we'll talk more about that. We'll talk more about the desert experience, the valley of the shadow of death. But really, the idea that God loves you so much that he provides you with relationship, that he loves you so much that he provides you with all the resources that you need, that he loves you so much that he builds into the rhythm of our lives so that we can have rest, that he loves you so much that even when we get all kinds of sideways as a stubborn sheep, that he restores us as the good shepherd and puts us back into those green pastures and those still waters, that we're made new, made whole, made complete, just as if it never happened. In fact, Jesus talks about this. Look at what Jesus says in Matthew 11, 28 through 30. He says, "Are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you burnt out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me. You'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn." He says, "I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live free and lightly." It's beautiful, right? It's beautiful. He talks about the unforced rhythms of grace. You learn how to put on clothes that fit and live a life that has meaning and have an identity that's good, and that he'll carry the weight for you. In some ways, Jesus is articulating a very similar statement, but he's just doing it in first person as Psalm 23. That the Lord is my shepherd and I shall not want. And he leads me, right? He leads me to green pastures and he makes me to lie down, right? He takes me by the still waters, that he restores my soul, and he leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Jesus just says it like this: I am the good shepherd. So if you're tired and you're worn out and you're burnt out on trying to do it by yourself, because in many ways that's religion, is a series of tally marks of right and wrong, good and evil. And if I could just get all my tally marks lined up in the right column. And Jesus goes, listen, I didn't come to abolish religion, but I came to restore it and make it back to its original place where grace is sufficient, not rules. And so he says, if you're tired of all of that, trying to do it on your own in some man-made way, come to me, get away with me. He comes back to that relationship, like just press into that green pasture, still water, relationship, provision, like rest and restoration. And he says, then I'll show you real rest, what it really looks like. Even when you walk, even when you work, you'll find the unforced rhythms of grace. I'm not going to give you things that are too heavy for you or ill-fitting for you. Keep your company with me, and you'll learn how to live freely and lightly. As we make our way into really the bulk of this year, I really want to encourage you to make sure that your relationship with God is right. Just like David, in right standing. Even though David wasn't always the most righteous of leaders, he always found himself back in right standing, allowing God to make him lie down and rest, take a break, get off of his plans and purposes. Didn't always know where he was going, so he got himself into a lot of trouble, and God put him back on the righteous path for his name's sake. Where God guides, he provides. But just like a sheep that's easily gone astray, we know that we have a good shepherd that will lead us and guide us, protect us, love us, restore us, if we'll allow him to. Will you do it? Will you allow God to give you rest? Will you allow this next season of your life to be led by the Good Shepherd instead of by our own ambitions and our own agendas? That's my plan for us as a church. I wish I could map out for you the 6 things that we're going to do. But in reality, we're going to take it one day at a time and let God guide and let God provide. And we're going to make ourselves available for each other and for our community and for our world. And I'm sure we'll come up with some ideas on what that looks like. But really, we want to press in and let God guide and God provide.